Hello everyone, my name is Gratton. Thanks for coming to DrupalCamp. There was some pretty heavy stuff going on in the last few talks. I will not tax your brain, don't worry. This will be a slow descent to lunch, so it should be quite an easy one for you. I think it's written on the website that this is advanced. It's probably not advanced, to be fair. It's, before I get into telling you a little bit about who I am, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about who I am not. People say I have a bit of a familiar face. Some people struggle to place me. Just FYI, that's not me. I've been to the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam and tourists were whispering and pointing at me. It was very uncomfortable. I didn't like it. That's not me. That's not me. That's not me also. Yeah, this, that's definitely not me. Okay, this is me. As I said, my name is Ross Gratton. I've been working with web technologies for over 17 years. I was originally a full-stack developer, though 17 years ago, full-stack front-end, the technology stack really wasn't what it was today, so the distinction wasn't really as important. We just sort of did everything. Now I specialize in front-end work. I've had a bit of a varied career. I've worked for small web companies. I've worked in-house for market-leading student-led companies. I've worked for startups. I've been a freelancer. I'm now the front-end lead for Procter & Stevenson. It's a Bristol agency, a Drupal agency based here in Bristol. They're a full-service agency. They do design and marketing and everything. I spend a lot of time working with Drupal websites. Obviously, that's why I'm here. I do a lot of Angular user interface builds, and recently I've been doing a lot of work with Ionic and hybrid mobile applications. You've seen me do this a lot already. I'm a big fan of a thumbs up. I'll probably do this a lot throughout the talk. Feel free to ignore it if it makes you uncomfortable. So why am I here? This is the first time I've done something like this. I've been asking myself the same thing since I agreed to do it. I worked briefly with one of the organizers of DrupalCamp Bristol. I don't know if they were desperate for speakers, but they asked me to do something, and I'll pretty much say yes to anything. So I'm here talking to you today. I did have a think, though, about what might be useful to people coming to this, and what might give you some information that you don't already have. And then I watched the last few talks, and I think you'll all know everything I'm about to tell you. So this might be pointless for some of you, but I decided the best thing to do was essentially talk to you about an experience that I had, and how it might help you think about these things in your own projects. So this brings us to task runners in a giant legacy Drupal project. So I'll lay the background first. Why would you want a task runner? Really, the main thing is it saves you a lot of time and a shitload of effort, and you'll probably be able to do some things in it that you couldn't do manually. So the biggest time saver for me, if you take things like sass compilation, I'll talk to you about sass in a minute. If you're not familiar with it, you probably are, and JS compilation, if you take those as a given, the biggest time saver for me is I can create icon font packs just by dropping an SVG into a folder. So something that used to take a big old process of mithering a designer and going backwards and forwards with them, tweaking some glyphs, trying to get everything right, only to do it all over again every time we want to add a new icon into a project, now takes about a second with it being all set up, and you don't really need a designer at all. So you're automated. So a few other things that you can use task runners for. You can compile and minify your sass. These are the things that I do literally every day with task runners. You can do a lot more. I compile twig components if you're componentizing your HTML. I'll minify and beautify HTML and twig depending on what your project requirements are. I'll create icon font packs with SVGs. I'll obfuscate, minify, and concatenate JavaScript. I'll JS lint my JavaScript. And generally move project files around. You can do this pretty easily once you've set everything up. And you can create and manage change logs. You can pretty much do anything with task runners. There's a whole bunch of packages out there that make things quite easy for you. So They're so powerful, in fact, that with some creative thinking, you can use task runners to make your own tools and frameworks. So I use task runners to create an HTML email generator. This is a Twig code on the left-hand side and a responsive HTML email that gets put out on the right-hand side. And this will pass litmus testing using just sort of Twig pseudocode. The example on here is a particularly complex configurable HTML email generator that we built for Panasonic. The core code for this was built using this HTML email generator, and then it was taken into Drupal and made configurable. And this goes past through its litmus testing, even allowing all the configuration that they do. So you can then, you don't need to use this Drupal one that we built. You could also use the generator tool that you made yourself, and an email that typically from designer to developer to build and test and then get into your marketing automation tool and get ready for publish, that would take maybe 1 to 2 days, can now be done in about 1 to 2 hours with the pseudocode, and it's completely reusable. So once you've set up your brand mechanism for creating emails, that can get even faster. So this is good. So task runners are nice. The task runner I use is Gulp. Other task runners are available. You can get Gulp from gulpjs.com. So let's have a bit of a talk about Gulp and Drupal. Off the bat, it's a bit fiddly. There's a few challenges that you come across fairly quickly when you're trying to put your task runners into Drupal. It's maybe a similar type of thing that we've just heard about with Composer. But the first thing that I came up against is where do you put it? Essentially, if we've decided that we want to use a task runner to compile our styles, our JavaScript, and maybe create an icon font pack, quite a simple use for them. If that's what we want to do, then where do we put it? And the main thinking would potentially be put it in your theme directory. It seems like the natural place for it. It's where all of our compiled assets are going to live when we're done with it. And on a small single theme project, I guess this would be fine. But let's introduce a second theme or a sub-theme. Now we're starting to get some problems. If we've put our task runner inside of one of our themes and we've got another theme, do we run another npm install? Bear in mind that every time you run one of these, you're going to get a whole new node modules directory. You can ignore that in your source code, but your IDs are going to start to struggle when they're trying to find things in all of these. So do we do that, or do we tell the original task runner that that was a new theme that it has to take advantage of and compile its assets into? So this gets a little bit complicated. Let's introduce a module, and we've got the same questions again. Do we now put another task runner into our module? Now, generally, it's my preference to handle the styles for a module inside of the theme anyway, because then it sort of makes it a little bit more reusable. However, sometimes you can't avoid it. You need some base styles in your module, so this is something that can happen. Or do you tell your original task runner that now it needs to think about your second theme and your module? It gets kind of complicated and pretty much unmanageable, and this is only with one extra theme and one extra module. So an option here, you could move all of your task runners up to the root and have it think about what's below it. You're still going to have a lot of complicated configuration to do. It would be nice to say we can use wildcard characters and things just to listen to what's below it, but in truth, because of the flexibility of Drupal and the complicated things you might do in your task runner, it's not always going to be possible. So let's leave task runners there for a moment and have a quick word on sass. I'm not going to talk to you about this in any depth, really. It's just a quick note to say what sass is, and really why I'm telling you about sass is because it's probably the first thing that you're going to use when you start thinking about task runners. It's the natural drawer into a task runner for most people. Sass is a language that adds programmatic functionality to CSS. So it gives you things like loops, conditional statements, functions, variables, nesting, and it allows you to take a much more considered approach to writing our styles. So CSS is a long, flat file. It's an interpreted language. Sass allows us to manage our styles in the way that we would manage our other functional code. So this opens up a lot of advanced styling methodologies to us, one of which is atomic CSS. This is how I like to work. I'm an advocate of atomic CSS. It's essentially an approach of architecting our styles the way we break down our project stylistically, and how we manage and build up our code base. A chap called Brad Fost has written extensively on this subject, so I'm not going to cover it anymore. Read that if you're not familiar with atomic CSS. Essentially, it's in its simplest form, Sass and atomic CSS gives us a toolkit of styles that we can pick from and choose to compile into our various different projects and style sheets. And I tell you this because the idea of a shared reusable source toolkit of styles and JavaScript and whatever else icons that we want in there, this is essential to create a manageable, well-constructed code base and stylistic front-end code base, and it really takes our front-end work to the next level, and it's probably the reason that you would want to use the task runner in the first place. So, Sass is good, and a reusable toolkit is good. So what else might be problematic when we start thinking about task runners in Drupal? One of the other challenges that we have is source control. I'm going to get a little deep on you now. For me, there are certain unwavering truths in our universe. One of them is Ryan Giggs made the wrong choice when he picked Wales. He should have picked England to represent internationally. Donald Trump will not last 4 years as president. James Corden, no matter how much he hobnobs and bigwigs with all of the people over in America, he will always be the chabby fat lad from Gavin and Stacey. And if you're putting task runners into source control, you're going to get merge conflicts. There is just no way around it. The majority of your issues are going to be configuration merge conflicts. If we're trying to create something that's reusable but requires configuration, we're going to have different configurations for different features and different branches. That's pretty much an unavoidable truth. If we have 3 branches in development, for example, 3 features, and they all use a task runner, we're going to have 3 different configurations. So this is fine in development, but as soon as we try and put this into our main branch, we're going to have a fair amount of cleanup to do. So that's not good. We don't like that. Another reason you might have issues with your source control, the concept of component files and compiled assets in and of itself creates a bit of a problem. Your compiled assets in source control are incredibly difficult to debug. Trying to fix merge conflicts in a minimized CSS file or an obfuscated JavaScript file is next to impossible. So you're going to have problems there. Another one, inaccessible assets. If you're trying to make your assets reusable, you'll often find that you want something someone else has built in a feature branch, and you can't have it because their feature branch maybe hasn't gone into development yet. Back into your dev branch, it maybe hasn't gone live yet. So reusable assets can be a bit of a problem when you're using task runners and source control. So this all brings us back to this. I've talked to you about task runners. I've talked to you about the challenges of them in a Drupal environment. We've talked about task runners and Sass. We've talked about the issues task runners can cause with source control. So the one thing that I haven't talked to you about yet is this giant legacy Drupal project. So I'll tell you about that now. This site existed long before I came to Procter & Stevenson. So a little bit of background on it. And always, while I'm telling you about this, bear in mind the difficulties of that original gulp configuration that I was talking about. This site is a Drupal 7 site with global reach. It's in 24 languages. It was first built in 2011. It's broken down into 7 separate business divisions. There are, all in Drupal, additional custom-built marketing and content tools attached. There are 125 custom modules, 150 contributed modules, and 16 themes. So it was a bit of a nightmare to work with, and I did not really want to work with it, but needs must, and I'm there to do a job. So I had to rethink how we could work with our front-end stack in this project because it was unmanageable. So here's what I wanted. I wanted a central store of Sass, JavaScript, and icons. I wanted to compile my assets into modules and themes. I wanted it all managed in source control. I wanted to minimize configuration conflicts, merge conflicts. and I wanted to ensure my assets were available across feature branches. Now, what you could do when coming into a project like this is try and take your entire code base and sort of reverse engineer it and re-architect it in all these methods going forward. It'd take you a long time, and you'd have a lot of difficulty making sure that you actually provide the same experience at the end as to what's there at the beginning. So that was really not in the scope of what I was trying to do. So all I was trying to do is provide a way to get the modern mechanisms that we can use in task runners available to us in this old project and provide a better method of working going forward. So my first attempt, I called it the global theme resource. Why? Well, it's pretty obvious, really. I thought, let's create a directory which houses our task runner that can sit alongside the other themes in this project. It can house all of our task runner configuration and all of our component files. And this seemed like the right place to put it functionality-wise, because it's the most similar to themes. And then we can push out all of our compiled assets into these different themes. I created a switchable configuration file. This is just a JSON file that gets loaded into Gulp. And what you would do here is you create a config object for your theme. So this is theme 1's config object. You set all of your paths for Gulp to compile to, and you set your current theme that you're working with. And then what happens is Gulp reads this file, it understands what it's supposed to do with all of the assets, and then it compiles out to those different directories. The reason I thought about doing it like this is because I thought this would minimize merge conflicts right off the bat. If you're creating a new object per feature or branch, then you can get a nice automated merge in there from Git because you're not editing what other people are doing. The one place you might have an issue is at the top where you're setting the theme that you're working on. It's just one string though, fairly easy to manage a merge conflict with one string. So that wasn't too much of a problem for me. It was a good start. However, this wasn't meant to be because I had issues right off the bat, and two things became pretty quickly clear. One of them was quite strange, actually. Some of you might know about this. I didn't know about it, and it caused a spot of bother with this code base. If you put a directory inside of the themes directory, don't identify it as a theme, and then stick a whole bunch of node module packages in there, your cache clear just goes apeshit. It doesn't like it, and it doesn't finish all of its cache clears. So I broke the repository and then had to reverse all of this. So first thing, the location of it is not a good place to put it. And then one of the guys in my team, Jamie, he said he was creating a new feature on this same code base, the same project, and he saw what I was doing, and he said, can I have access to the global theme resource? I thought, fantastic, this is exactly what it's for. So I got everything ready, and I committed it all up for him so he could start working with it. Only I then realized he was working in a feature branch that had been taken from dev maybe 2 weeks prior, worked on by a backender, passed across to him, and so that branch had no knowledge about anything I was doing. To get what I wanted into his branch was a whole series of remerges and then bring dev into his feature branch, and that might have some other things in it. So that was a bit of a mess too. So big old issues and violations of the things that I actually wanted to achieve with this. So just a quick burn down of this. The location of the global theme resource was causing errors, and the assets were not accessible across feature branches. Big old fail there. But there were some good things. We had a central asset store using this methodology. We had a switchable configuration, which minimized merge conflicts and allowed us to compile assets into themes and modules. So the big problem seemed to be the location and working with it in Git. So I had some chats with the people in our department and tried to see those guys that knew more about Git than me. Is there a better way that I can manage this? How do I, maybe it's about creating a nested repo in Git, or I don't know the exact name, I can't remember. But then something struck me. I wanted to manage all of this in source control. That was one of the 5 points that I put on at the beginning. And I wanted, obviously, the feature work needed to be in source control. But what hit me was the feature branches, they don't care about the component files. They only care about the compiled assets. So my component files don't necessarily have to be in the same code base as the compiled assets. So if I remove the component assets from this code base, it starts to fix the Git problems maybe. Things are available across multiple branches. So I thought maybe in attempt 2, let's externalize the global theme resource. Let's take it out of the large legacy Drupal project. So a method came to mind. Let's create a standalone repo for the global theme resource. Let's sit the GTR code base alongside the website code base. Then what we do is we just check out our feature branch that we're working on in the website. We configure the global theme resource in its code base to know about the feature branch, to compile its assets into the website code base. Then when we're done, we just commit our compiled assets up from the Drupal code base, and we can do a separate commit up to our global theme resource. And this works. So this is the method we're actually using currently with Procter & Stevenson. I think we've put 2 large features live using this method, using the new task runners. It's in production. Up to this point, it's working. So externalizing the global theme resource, taking it away from the Drupal code base, actually does quite a lot of good. It feels counterintuitive, but with the new ways of thinking about developing, we don't really have to stick to the same traditional thinking about what a project code base says anymore. We're seeing a lot of decentralized projects, what with microservices and the different front ends that we could have. So why not take the stylistic or the front end stack also away from the back end? So it feels like a fairly natural step. So what was good here? We've still got a switchable configuration file that allows us to compile into themes and modules. We've still got our central asset store. However, now our assets are available across feature branches. There is more appropriate source control management for both, and there are no merge conflicts in the website repo caused by task runners, because there are no task runners in the website repo. Also, there are no more Drupal errors. Not at all. There'll still be Drupal errors. I mean, just from the task runner, there will be Drupal errors. The website code base stays a little leaner. We're able to merge more often into our global theme resource, and this is one of the big ones. In terms of creating assets that are reusable across your themes, what you want to be able to do is do a small run of, I've created some atoms, molecules, quarks, or whatever you want to call them. I've created this, and I've committed them back up to the global theme resource, and they're being used in this theme over here in the website, but I want to use them over here in this module. A smaller commit cycle into your global theme resource means they're always available for you. So also, because the global theme resource is no longer in this giant legacy Drupal project, you can use it in any project. Any project that your client uses the same branding for, it's available to you. So it's even more reusable. And the global theme resource could be used as a base for a pattern library going forward. I really want to get pattern libraries in. I'm totally gutted that I couldn't go to the other talk because it was on at the same time. I might try and grab them afterwards and talk to them about that. So this is good. So we're in a good spot with it. So a bit of a conclusion for you. What I started out wanting to do was enable task runners in a large, giant legacy Drupal project. But what became quite clear is my thinking was probably a little bit too narrow. By going through the process, I realized I can probably think about things in a little bit of a different way. So this, as lofty as that sounds, transcends trying to get task runners into Drupal. Not necessarily meaning you can't put task runners into Drupal, you absolutely can. My experiences with this project were they shouldn't be in Drupal. So we can think about assets at a brand level and not a project level, which means that not only, if we do this, not only do we get comfortable with the idea of a global front-end stack that we can use in lots of different projects, and when you start to think about things like Angular and Ionic and all of these programs that allow you to use HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, then we can harness the power of task runners to work with lots of different projects, and we can allow our assets to be used across platforms, projects, and they're all for the brand. And it opens the door to creating better deliverables for us. Essentially, we can use this stuff as the basis for style guides, for pattern libraries, for reusable components for our clients. So instead of just trying to engineer a way to get something handy into an old project, we can actually take a more appropriate response and think, how do we make this better for our client? You've had a giant project for the last 6-7 years. How do I make this easier for you to work with? So, to finish up, there isn't actually a task runner in a giant legacy Drupal project here. There is no spoon, and I hope this isn't too much of a cop-out for you. What I'm essentially trying to say is you can definitely use task runners in your legacy projects. You can definitely use task runners in Drupal, but spend some time considering if that's the best place for them when you're using them. Sometimes the best place for them is actually outside of Drupal. So I hope that's been useful for you, and yeah. If you have any questions, then I'll do my best to answer them. But if not, then thank you for listening. Sure.
Yeah, just wanted to clarify just a couple of points.
Yeah.
So, this global theme resource is not actually a Drupal theme. It's just like assets, sass files,
yeah,
task runner, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then in your task runner, you've got a task that kind of pushes compile CSS into individual modules and so on.
Correct. Yeah.
All right. And then, so if you've got a custom module that you've pushed some compile JS and CSS, you would then commit those to the
website repo, yeah, to the thing that houses the module. Because yeah, when you're working with component files and compiled assets, the two really don't care about each other. It's the process in the middle that we're concerned with. So yeah, your website just takes your compiled assets. There is a problem that happens here though, and it's one of, I suppose, communication and education. If you take this methodology and somebody comes to your website repo and doesn't know that this other thing exists, then there is the danger that they can just start editing those files that have been compiled. So that is a problem that can occur. The only way around it really is to tell everybody that you're working with this methodology from the outset, and then you can sort of avoid that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, it's something I need to do better at work. I've had a couple of guys come to me and say, this file's a bit of a mess, what's going on? It's a compiled file, I got to tell them about this. And so I probably need to do this internally and just tell everybody what's going on with it, but yeah.
So if you keep the originals and the GTR, and then you compile, say, the styles, and you commit those into your main repo, and they are arguably minified, do you not get much of it?
You do.
So,
but it doesn't matter because you're completely overwriting it. There is no merge because you're recompiling from the source file, from the source components. You're not concerned with it merging together. You're completely overwriting it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Anyone else?
So in your global theme resource, do you have a massive list of where you want? Because you said you've got quite a lot of modules.
Yeah.
And if you're putting your base CSS and JavaScript into these things, you must have a massive array of paths where you map into.
Yeah.
Is that a problem to manage?
To be continued. Currently, it's not used in that many of the massive number of them. I think we've got it in 6 currently, 6 different features. And so this is the thing. Some of the features actually use modules as well as themes. So those configuration objects have to be fairly flexible. So it's in a state of flux. It's never going to be a situation where you can do this off the bat and then expect it to work with absolutely everything you've got. But yes, there could be a scenario where there's 150 configuration objects in this thing. That would get quite difficult to manage. You do have to think about like the naming of your keys and things so it's appropriate to the various different projects and themes and modules and stuff like that. It could get difficult to manage, yeah. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. I don't have an answer to say it won't be. It probably will get difficult. But as long as we keep an eye on it, I think it is manageable no matter how tricky it will be, yeah. Yeah. Good, thank you guys. you.